So, uh, yesterday I left off with some to dos. I am coming back here to you in the afternoon. So, if you're watching this on the archive and you don't know what time of day it is for me, I've already spent the morning doing a bunch of the cleanup pass, and I ended up checking off just a bunch of these. So, let me show you what happened. The uh, the rule scripts just went back to being a single rule script. There's no pre and post anymore. That just worked out the way I kind of was envisioning, or at least it's 50% of the way there. The uh, the the whole thing works now by just saying do this work, and the work includes a couple of different pieces, but I don't actually have a single spot where there's a central list of what all these pieces are. But they're basically things like you can set it up to do branch moves, you can set it up to do tile moves, and we haven't yet worked on the vocabulary for gatherers to become more rich here, but there could be a more rich gather vocabulary coming, possibly. We don't know yet. But then there's the ability to make machine calls and machine jumps. So you can say at the end of any of these rules what the next state is supposed to be. If you don't, then the next state is whichever one you're on. So that creates a loop onto of a state onto itself, which is fine. But if you want to move ahead to something else, you say the next state is blah, and you put the state in. Or you can make a call. And in that case, you also set the next state for this machine, but then you're saying create a new machine on top of me in the stack. And so when this state is done, that state picks up. But then there are some things that can happen in between rules. And so the rules tell us a little bit about what to do. And then the core engine can handle things like after a rule has run, it can gather moves from players, it can run the moves that were gathered, and then it can run like automatic handlers. And so the exact way that's working right now is that we run, during a knit we run the hook rule, we run the rule script, then we gather player decisions here, we run the moves here. The reason this is separate is because there's the idea that a queue of moves might be paused and resumed later if one of the moves themselves wants to push a machine on the stack that interrupts the move queue. I'm not 100% sure that that's a good idea, but until I've played with the possibility and seen how a couple of these different variations on these mechanics feel, I don't want to rule it out. And we're getting close to the point where I can then fuse this with that visualizer. That's where this is all driving, is the RPG simulator that I've got is going to get fused with the visualizer, so that I can start to see what this would feel like as a game mechanic, and maybe even add in real controls. And then I'll be able to actually make decisions based on what feels like it is the right vibe for the game idea. But before I can go about making decisions at that level with like full knowledge of what's going on, I'm kind of just leaving possibilities open to explore. So the possibility I'm leaving open here is that the list of moves might, you might be going through the moves that were queued up, and then some of them might be able to say, stop what's happening, resolve this in place with another change of context before we come back and finish out what happened. It would essentially mean that whatever you were doing, right, whatever granularity of time, if you're in an encounter, then for something to pause the sequence of moves, it would have to be a step out of normal time. Like it have to be a dream sequence or parallel continuum, or like a series of decisions that are instantaneous but that have to be scripted over a series of resolves that are sequential anyway from the interface perspective. Whatever it is, it would have to be more instantaneous than it'd have to be something that counts as being just as instantaneous in the story, as all the moves. But the same thing could be occurring at much larger granularity. So during a journey, you make forward progress. That represents a much larger granularity of time in the story than an encounter move. So it would make sense if that had a mini game associated with it sometimes that was immediate and that uh, ran before the uh, the next state or the interruptions. Finally, right, zooming back out, we run the rule, we gather player decisions if it is relevant, we run the moves if there are any, then we run interruptions. Interruptions is this idea that after everything has happened with a rule, and after moves have run, some basic checks need to be performed. And right now, the basic checks are always the same. But you can see there's this to-do of asking how are these going to get coded onto the machine, by which I mean instead of having them built into the machine, how can they be coded by the data structure that acts as the software running through the machine, right? The machine is sort of a fixed pattern cycle thing. It's kind of like a virtual machine in that sense. It's a design to just do the same thing every time you invoke it, but then that same thing needs to be able to cover all these different flavors based on what data you plug in, and that data you plug in, that's the source, right? And so in this case, the source needs to somehow tell us what these interruptions are going to be, and I don't know what granularity they belong at yet. So this is the part where it's 50%, right? This is the part that isn't answered yet. But what is answered is how the rest of it can fit together nicely, at least up till now. There's another maybe wrinkle. It's not a wrinkle now, but I'm not convinced it won't be a wrinkle later. However, we can go look at those things, think about them more, but it's not what I intend to do first, right? We'll get to that later if that's something I want to do. I do think there are some ways that I could see these interrupts getting coded. They might be coded as properties of the machine, so each machine might say what interrupts they code for, but there might also be ones that want to be more global, like always available or always in play, or ones that are in play for a large scope, like, right here, there's the basic death checks getting run. This one is not even pushing a machine on the stack. This one is just modifying the next state of the current machine, right? So this is an important concept. There are situations like if a party that's in play is dead, that this machine and most machines by default want that to mean go to an exit, but that doesn't always have to be true, right? It could be that we want a machine where when a party dies, it triggers something else within that same machine to happen. But a lot of times what it means, like for most systems, the default is this doesn't have anything to say about what to do with a party that's dead. The container might. And so then we just say, okay, exit out of this, let the previous spot in the stack look at this. The reason the previous spot in the stack might have something to say about it is that it might not be the player party, right? If I go into an encounter, one of the parties dying is an exit state for an encounter, but it is not an exit state for the journey that was running it if the player party is not the one that died, right? Furthermore, I could imagine, like, if for instance I've dropped the idea before several times that there might be a sort of dream world aspect to the rules, and if there is, the rule might be that upon entering the dream world, you are actually dealing with a copy of your character entity, not the original, because you're in the dream now, and in the dream world, you might do a number of things and then come out of it, and in the process, you might lose all your hearts, and that might be what causes the end of the dream. But then the fact that the player character is dead and the player party is dead will then be handled at some layer in the stack by one of these things that has a different interrupt that says, oh, if this character is dead, then that means we are going to end the dream sequence, yes, and honestly, it's still not even different. It's just that was a copy, right? It wasn't the original. So the next one down will not be looking at the same entities. That wasn't even a good example. I don't entirely know, but I have uh, a notion that it might be overridable, or at least there might be places where it wants to say different. So far, it's actually true to say that if any of the parties, there could also be in machines or rules where there are a multitude of parties in play simultaneously, and that when one of them dies, that the handling for that is to remove them from the thing, but keep playing the rest, right? And then there'd be a special rule that's like, if this is a player party that died, then more might need to happen. Like that still might need to be considered a game over somehow, or an exit state at the very least for the current machine. So I do want this sort of programmable interrupt thing eventually. However, it works for now, and I'm leaving it here. The piece I want to deal with is the part right here that says that I want to develop the vocabulary for the moveset expressions. Right, that's the to-do I'm actually interested in. And that to-do is talking about let's see. Set expression. Right, there we go. So there's these moments in the rule scripts where they can say what their that they are that some moves should happen, right? There's a spot here where we want to say, hey, what are the moves that we want to allow the player to pick from based on the set of tiles they have. And that's what the decision moves here says. It says this party should choose moves, and this should be the sort of, it's called move limit right now, but this is sort of like the selector, and there's two separate things happening, and they have some non-orthogonal overlapping quality to them. So we don't entirely want to pick them apart into two ideas, or at least if we do pick them apart into two ideas, we got to figure out our plan, and if we're satisfied with maintaining certain things in parallel and other things not, or trying to look at it and see if there's some way in which we could make a single system out of both that has within it the expression of, you know, the first half, the second half, or the two together, depending on the situation. So here are the things. One is the selector. Which tiles are moves that can be used right now? And right now there's no selector. So every time you say we can do moves, it gathers the set of all possible moves. And that's the set of all possible moves in all situations, given the current set of characters and their tile boards. Right? I have some entity tree, and I just say, derived from this, what are all the possible moves? And I assign a move. Each move is assigned to a specific character who can do it, and therefore assigned to the player who controls that character. And then there's the second issue of how many moves of each kind are allowed to be used. Right? What is the amount of time, or like there's this, in order to control this mechanism may just be a waste of time to be working on, honestly. It may be because just everybody should get to pick one move, but a lot of the ideas I have rely on some moves being able to be done in conjunction, like a quick action and an action together. There are a couple characters who, if I didn't have quick actions and actions together, I'd have to redesign their tiles to somehow work as both of the effects that I get from running that two moves separately, but then you also lose certain compositionality. Like right now, the captain starts with this taunt tile, and that's a quick action. And so the captain can taunt and attack or just attack. Now, if later the captain got a second move and it was an action, now the captain suddenly has four choices: taunt or not taunt, and then attack or this other move. Now, there's usually no downside to attacking. That's why not attacking at all isn't an option, although that's technically there too, right? But there's something cool about having a couple types of moves because of how it allows for combinatorial explosion of possible strategies. Um, and it also lets you like sort of do a bit of chaining. Like you can imagine a quick action that is a modifier to a magic spell that makes it happen faster. Your spell will run earlier in the initiative order or something, right? And again, that relies on this idea of allowing two moves. So it's built in at a lot of layers. There's another category of moves, quick actions, actions. There's also activities. Right now, there's also reactions. Reactions kind of exist because of the lack of a scoping mechanism. Right, if I had tagging, I might not need reactions. I might just have quick actions that are uh, narrowly like scoped to a narrowly scoped with their tags. Um, so let me take a look around at some of these to dos. So the cases are here. I want to be able to say using quick actions. And this speed tag. What? Let me just sketch out what this might look like. Yeah, let's just sketch out what this might look like if I had those new abilities added to the system. So this is definitely for the fleet party. Um, it could be like this. Right, like let's just start. The only issue with this as the way of doing things is, well, there's a couple issues here. If I do things this way, then one, if I'm sending out moves to multiple parties, I have to set up the whole thing every time. Kind of makes me feel like what really wants to happen here is that if a decision is being made, that the basic rule for that decision is the same for everyone, but that might not actually be what I I actually take that back. I might want to say certain parties are going to get access to certain moves asymmetrically if it's an asymmetric game being played. So I am going to give each one. Okay, so I think that the main issue with this then is going to be that it is not actually the whole set of what I want. Right here, I actually have a different problem, which is, I guess, figuring out might be like that. That makes me want to also do Streamer99. Hello, I'm doing good. How are you? Now this one actually does want to say more. For one thing, like this. And so it might just be better to have these be derived. Or these could be move kinds, and we could eliminate this as eliminate the whole thing where this is a tile to begin with. Use like an array of byte counters or something. There's really only three possibilities, which is that I want the counter to be 0, 1, or infinity. And I haven't implemented the infinity case either. But the other issue here is that there are actually two different types of situations. This wants awesome. I'm glad it's helpful. um So this one actually wants to say more. It wants to say you have to have a dream tag in order to use a move here. Regular moves are actually getting ruled out. And so this isn't quite enough. Imagine we started doing stuff like this. Now, if these are flags, we could also do it this way. We could say there's a required mask and an enabled mask. Like this. Now the only issue is how this is going to actually work is that I also want to be able to modify these from the tiles. So the actual rule should be something that can be written from a tile. In this case, it would actually come from sleep tile. Now, it could be a part of the gather moves, right? I mean, this is the event that runs whenever we're gathering moves already. But this was designed to run for the purpose of updating this tile set with new stuff, adding new stuff to the tile set, the set of possible moves. And these are going to go through the filter. The filter actually needs to be known. Either the filter needs to be known ahead of time or it needs to be applied after the fact. And if it's applied after the fact, then we have to overgather and then filter. But if it's known ahead of time and then applied, then it's going to be faster to build the move set once we start building it, but slower to get the masks because we have to do yet another scan. But of course, we're counting on being able to accelerate these hooks down the line. So this could be another way it could work, though, is that tiles could put this information on their proto. Tile could say, there's only one issue with this, which is it's rather limited. I could say, something like this. Now, whenever you have a tile, all the tiles require masks. Get poured together to one big requirement mask, and any move that wants to be run has to have all the requirements. And then we still want the ability to add things to the requirement mask just from the moment of running the moves to kind of just feels like it's actually going to be faster at the end if this is like right, you know what I mean? Um, what is this? This is the sort of is move counters together with the move filter, the move options, the move controls, move parameters, move possibilities, um, move filter, the move limit, um, I like that because of how much lighter it is to actually conjure one of these things up this way. And it still lets me specify everything that I actually have been intending to specify. Here, what happens is you get one Okay. So this might be a thing to do at another time. I don't actually have any dream moves yet, and I don't have any um and it would require that extra decision about how to modify the filter. That's two things, two variables instead of one. But we can do the rest of this. Okay, so our speed moves. These are moves that become available when you are trying to generate speed, whether that be for running or for chasing. Or fleeing or chasing. That's the only speed move. Okay. Oh, I just realized I didn't catch up on chat yet. Shimmer99 asked earlier, what did the RPG macros do? These are wrappers around symbol set declarations and definitions. So basically, it creates a global variable, places it into an array of its type. So like tile scripts go into an array of tile scripts. It creates the name of that global is set by this first part. The data attached to that global includes this string and the function body here, or rather, a pointer to the function that does this. And the parameter to this is, well, in this case, there are two parameters to this, the context and the proto. Most things only have the context parameter and then like a void star that doesn't carry anything or is like a parameter for that specific kind of hook. This one happens to have the tile proto be the second parameter. But basically, all of my hooks are two pointers. The first one's always the context. The second one's an arbitrary data pointer that I can rename and retype. But then I just store them all inside of I throw away the type information about the pointer type for the second parameter whenever I store them in a struct, just to make it life easier. Where are we at? Man, I am feeling quiet today. I'm realizing I didn't even say anything when I got up for a sec there. I was just, all right. So journey should have an infinite on quick actions and actions, and give you one activity. And then if we want to have journey specific or like travel specific moves, we can do that too. I also don't want to go crazy far with filtering everything this way. Because um, I also have conditionals. So I can always say, hey, if I want something to be a move that you can do, but it's under specific situations, I don't need to figure out how to fit that into the flags. I can just say, oh, it's, if it's got to be while you are in a forest, then I could just put that in a conditional. Check the location handle and see if it has a forest property on it. It's not about asking if the current move selector is filtering for forest moves, because then I'm going to have way too many move guys. And that does raise the question, why not just do that with the ones I've already got, like Run and Dream? Let me show you why I'm a little torn about that idea. So I've talked about this before, but in the case of Run, it could work. There's probably going to be more of these. Like, I want more than just Run. The chasing minigame is serious. Like, I am essentially turning the RPG turn-based rule set into the theater for telling the same sort of stories that you get out of a traditional roguelike, where you have things like a blink spell and a teleport scroll as escape options. I think tactical retreat is an interesting part of the tension of those games that I want to have in the possibility space for this, but I want to tell it all through a more discrete turn-based logical, not logical, sort of just extremely almost like card game like, I have some moves, you have some moves, some competition of states occurs, and then maybe I do or don't get into whatever condition I want to get into to change the state. Well, that includes things like when you're having a flee sequence, that's where a blink spell matters. It's not a combat spell for dealing damage, it's for getting away or for catching up to someone who's trying to get away. So, what I want to do is I'm just having a thought in my head that there's another aspect to all of this I've never explored that I've been meaning to explore. That'll be so much fun to do once we've got the simulation up and running, the way it might work. But coming back to what I'm thinking here, the issue is there might be a lot of these. There might be a lot of these, about the same number, maybe a little less common, but they might be just as important as moves that deal damage in a lot of ways, right? There are moves for generating lots of speed. There are moves for generating speed for yourself and for a party member. There are moves for generating speed and leaving behind a trap or a smoke screen to give yourself another advantage, give the opponents a disadvantage, whatever the case may be. And so since this is a large category, it might just be nice to have it at this level, right? Because then when you get a move, you can see like, oh, this is a speed move. This is a running move or whatever it's going to end up being called, right? In the interface for humans, you can imagine that it'll be nice to actually just see it labeled, not as a complexly phrased conditional that shows up in lots of the descriptions. That when you are in a speed scenario, however that would get phrased, you may blah, but actually as a like icon almost like built into the visualization of the tile, top level kinds of things. Similarly with dreams, I don't know that there will be as many of them, but I think that it's significant in the dream case for another reason. With this idea of dream moves, the conditional could be if you have a sleep tile, you may use these moves. But I also separately need something that says that you may not use a tile if you have a sleep, right? All your normal non-dream moves are supposed to get removed from you, right? So you're supposed to have right now the way I do that is whenever you have sleep, the sleep script says that all of your all your move counters get zeroed out at the beginning of the round. So that just enforces that you can't do stuff there. If someone were to use a quick move that put you to sleep before your move ran, it should technically prevent your move from running, but it doesn't work that way because falling asleep doesn't knock out your moves. It's having sleep at the beginning of the round that knocks out your moves. It's a little bit unfinished. It's a little bit not right. I could keep it this way, but what makes more sense to me is to say not that it takes away your moves, but that it changes your moves. This way, sleep moves, dream moves are still there. This way, dream moves are still there. But if I'm going to remove something, if it does not make a move not possible, right? That's the question. How am I going to say I have a conditional that I can add to any clause, and that's a thing that each tile can have on any of its clauses that says this effect or this move applies under this condition. But this is more like an anti-condition on moves as they get added to the set, right? This would be a move, a condition. Somehow sleep would have to say, if I were going to do this without flags, somehow sleep would have to say, first of all, any dream move would have to have a conditional that says RPG. Let's pretend we have a dream move real quick. This is going to be target is fake. This would have to have a clause for this used that says, So this will wake yourself up. And then you just gotta say wake up self. This used condition is right. So now the conditional is if we have a sleep tile, we can use this. Now there's other stuff missing here. What actually has to happen is we have to get something like this. This is missing. It's complicated. We haven't got to building all of that yet. But this like provisional version basically does the main idea. We can wake yourself up and right? So this is how the wake up self would have to look. I'd have to say that tiles like this, I'll just build by the way, so this should work. This should already work, which is cool. But the idea is I can only use it under this condition. Great. But now the other way around, how do I make sure I can't attack? And the issue becomes I don't want to have attack and every other thing ever also have to say something about sleep. It's not so bad that this might have to say something about the sleep tile, right? That would be okay, because you're not going to be able to talk about dream moves at all without referring to the concept of sleep. But here I would have to say this is the most basic one in the world, and if it doesn't know about the sleep concept, then it doesn't work correctly, because you can still use it from sleep. So it's not really good enough to just say we can use conditionals to do this, because it's the wrong pattern of expression. I need to be able to say default isn't good enough, and that's what I'm really building out here. So the way that I would want this to work is instead of checking for the sleep tile as a conditional, I'm actually saying you gotta have the dream move kind. That way, somehow or another, yeah. That way, this can be selected for anyone who's sleeping, and this can be deselected just because for being blank, just for missing that, right? I can rule out all the defaults that way. And that's what I want. I want to be able to require a mark on the tile, and I can't do that with a conditional. I think this is the right direction because of that. But in the case of something like speed, I think it's more just a convenience thing. It could be a conditional. So I'm not going to say that I'm ruling out. The speed thing is just a matter of saying speed moves only make sense to be in the mix when there's any reason to generate speed in the context, which is not always the case. Then the only issue is with the sleep part is that I still need some way for the sleep tile to say that when you have sleep, you you suddenly require the dream flag. I don't have that. And that I'm going to have to just hold off on for now. That's the part I don't want to figure out. But like, there we go. Okay, let's get back to making a build. Ooh, they got kind of beat up there. A lot of times they make it with 4, but I guess it's not that odd the question for them to only make it. Wow, just 1? Rough. This is a difficult journey. Okay. It would help if the protect brain was written a little smarter. It still just puts the protected on anybody, and I think that it should wait for somebody to get hit, so it shouldn't be assigning it when it's at full health, and it should be assigning it to whoever has the lowest health as soon as possible from there. The reason I haven't gone and added that to the brain yet is because I want to side by side it to test a good test case for the simulation histogram stuff. So random focus. So move selectors kind of done. Kind of looks like that worked. Nothing else to say there. Except that enable and require haven't been put into the mix yet. So now what I want to do is I want to say when we are gathering moves, there is a moves gather from tiles. We apply this to a particular frame because that gives us all of the entities that we care about. Apply it to a particular context because everything has to be applied to a context. We save the final move set into an arena. Here the regs, or here the gather begins, and until the gather ends, we aren't able to start another gather, but we're able to run RPG move gather push to add stuff to the set. what I want to do today is whenever we call gather begin, which isn't just here, we also do it, we use this data structure a couple of places. But I think we want to be able to set the selector, or specifically we want to be able to set the enabled and required masks. For the gather. Now that's not the entirety because each character will have different masks depending on their tiles, as we know from Sleep. But we won't worry about that part yet. Here I'm just going to set it to include all because this is not for the same purpose. This is gathering for player decisions. And so essentially things that are submitted there should already be possible. But here, I gotta figure out where these masks are gonna come from. I think enabled comes from moves gather from tiles. Probably also just gonna need to actually have an enabled and a required filter. Hmm. Okay, so we're gonna have to hack it a little bit and fix it over time. So when we run the rule right here, it generates the decisions that it wants players to make as data structures. And yeah, and this just doesn't quite work out right because I'm not it doesn't work to send these as parameters, so I'm gonna have to back off and do this a different way. Um, Let me take a quick break, and when I come back, I will explain what's going wrong, and we'll fix it. Let me just leave it to do here. Yeah. So the problem is I already have the idea that when I submit these decisions, each one can have a separate selector, and I haven't taken advantage of that. But I have had a situation where one party is involved and the other one doesn't get any moves at all. Right? During the flee chase, the runners, the people fleeing, make all of their moves, and then the chasers get to make all of their moves. And the result of that is that the I can't just set one gather that touches all parties with one set of filters, right? Actually, what's happening here is when I do a gather, the reason that I do a gather for all parties at once is because tiles can modify the move set, right? I want to be able to say that there's that gather moves, just like this is what the sleep So sleep says when we are gathering moves, it adds the wake up tile to everyone in your party, right? But you could imagine that you might want to add things to your enemies' tiles, right? You might have a special power that you use that they can prevent, but it takes an action from them to prevent it. And so somebody has to sacrifice their action just to prevent your thing from working every turn because it's so bad or whatever, right? Um, the the point is that I want to run gathers across the entire state of the entity tree at once because there are cross connections here. But the rule about what moves you can use is determined by things local to your hierarchy. And I guess it's really just comes down to each character needs to have its own masks known on demand before we start generating any of the moves. So maybe it really does need to just happen in two passes. Maybe there needs to be a pass of going over the decisions and saying, okay, this party has all of these things enabled and required, and then scanning the entire set of tiles for any modifiers to the masks for each character. So each character will already have a mask inherited from its party, essentially. And then we'll do an event, a hookable event that modifies the masks on a per character basis. You basically can imagine that a tile like sleep will just say, okay, grab my holder and add in the dream kind as required. So this would be like this: RPG tile script clause sleep on gather filters or selectors and the way sleep is going to modify the selectors is it's going to go holder equals RPG this character, holder enabled equals or required or equals RPG move kind flag dream, right? I think that's how it has to go. And then yeah, let's just track it down that way. It's gonna mean a little more yes. Okay. So this was reducible, so I am saying let's reduce it. We throw that into the scratch arena. Where we talk about the frame, we mean the machine frame. Good. Before we do this, here we're scanning each party, and we're doing this. Let's first do set filters, and then do gather tiles. So when we set filters, what we do is we do for each decision, if the decision kind equals RPG decision kind moves, then grab the party from the decision and say, for all of the characters in this party, the enabled and the required are going to be figured out by looking at RPG enabled, required, decision selector dot one dot inf dot enabled dot required. And this one is required. And then we go and set them all like that. And then we gather, we run the gather moves. Yeah, when does gather moves get executed? It doesn't. We probably dropped it and didn't notice. I still have a log? I don't. That's too bad. I'm pretty sure sleep has still actually been working, so if gather moves isn't getting called, how is that possible? Here I define it, here I rely on it. It must have just very recently broken and not gotten caught. Well, they probably still wake up from getting hit, so they've just had a disadvantage ever since that mistake. I gotta get the histograms up and running because they let me catch drift, right? If something changes, I can see it in the histograms, but I can't see it in the logs. I can use the logs more for debugging, seeing when things didn't, when I know something's not going right, I can see the steps that aren't right, but I can't spot the issue. So I then want to take all of that data and turn it into the take the whole simulation and turn it into the histogram visualization so that I can spot changes in the behavior when they're not expected, right? If I didn't mean for the rules of the game to change, then I want to be able to see when they're changing by looking at the histogram, and that's why I want to get those histograms back. I've just been working on the core engine structure with a really narrow focus because I also want to get to that visualization problem. Oh man, so many fronts on which I could make progress. Why I can't put it down. So cool. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Lost my train of thought on what I was doing. Gather moves. Yeah, so gather moves. After we've done this, here we just gather all the tiles that are attached. There should be an RPG event on all. Context RPG event. Gather moves. 0. 0. Machine frame. So there's our gather moves. And then what I think we want to do is gather filter moves, something like that. And what this does is filter move. is it lets me modify the flags on my entity, my character entity, which I can do freely. So like when this says filter moves, it means that when this tile's on this holder, it modifies itself, but it could have gone and looked for its own party, or it could have gone and looked for the enemy party, or it could have been not attached to a character at all and just scanning all the characters for some other tile. Who knows? It's part of the point, is it could be a lot of stuff. That sets the filters. Gather begin. Yeah, so this is just the wrong direction. We're not going to pass them that way because they're not for everybody going to be the same anyways. So we set the filters. You know, it also occurs to me that I should scan all the characters once up here, just to clear them all to 0, since the decision here doesn't guarantee that everyone gets mentioned as in their party. There's a lot of optimizations to do here, obviously. Part of the thing is we're just going to have to get off of the entity tree heavy reliance soon. The tiles are going to go. That's going to make the tree a lot flatter. And then I think we'll just end up building an engine without much of an entity at all. Enabled. Acquired. Okay. Now, the rule is whenever we do a move, gather, push, I do want to modify this a little bit, actually. Gather comes to an end. Gather begins again. This time, no filter enablement. Then whenever we do a push, we now are going to have to do tile proto. Tile proto from ID, context tile ID. If the proto does not equal 0, so we're adding that check in because we have to do the get here now anyways. Hey, Alex. Proto. This is a program called ForCoder. It's designed after Emacs though, so it is a reasonable it is a reasonable inference from the appearance of the program. Gather push. Nice. We get the proto if the context gather move filter moves. If this is not enabled, let's see. Let's do. Yeah, let's do, if it's not enabled, then we just are going to go ahead and do the thing. But if it is, so if we're filtering the moves, then if the context if the proto move kind flags, that gives us the tile flags. Then we can go the character. I'm going to shorten this. Character. Enabled and tile flags does not equal 0. So all that it takes for this to make it enabled and tile flags equals tile flags. So if something here isn't enabled, then it's not allowed, right? This is saying only certain moves are enabled. If you have a flag, but that flag is not enabled, then this move isn't enabled, right? So for instance, speed moves aren't enabled if the speed move enablement flag isn't set, right? Moves that are labeled with the speed flag mean that we will use this move if speed game is enabled. Similarly with dream moves say we use this move if dream moves are enabled. But then, at the same time, we want to say that required in tile flags needs to equal required. So moves that are missing a flag, if a move doesn't have a flag that we are looking for instance, if we're saying dream moves are required, this character is asleep, they cannot use moves unless they are labeled dream. Well, then this would have a dream bit here, and we would be expecting that a bunch of moves will come here and not have a dream bit, and so they won't match this. But if we have both of these, then we can allow it. And really what we're trying to say is, because we already were going to allow it, what we're trying to say is here we always allow it, but if we're filtering, then we allow it if these conditions are met, and that becomes our condition there. Then we push the move. There we go. You're currently learning C. That's awesome. I can't really claim to be an Emacs user myself. I used it for maybe a year or two before 4Coder was ready and I switched to that. Before that, I think I was using stuff like the Visual Studio built-in editor and Notepad++. I've never actually learned the Vim side. I touched Emacs for just a little bit. Couldn't really say that I know it, and then I became a 4Coder user. Only one made it? 4 made it? 3 made it? Okay. This guy's asleep. Death Resolves takes him out. Exit. Encounter round dispatch. Encounter fight. Is that right? Encounter round dispatch. This should be going to decision, not dispatch. Encounter round dispatch is only meant to be followed by decision. Everyone else gets, okay, you make a decision every time. There's a little bug. Okay. Decision, dispatch, fight, reaction to death, resolve. Okay, I need to find someone asleep. They're just resting. I need to find someone asleep and they're not resting. None of the spores are hitting this time. Okay. Try again. There we go. This character's asleep. And these characters are dying. Death resolve does not give them an action, so they can't actually wake him up. Exit. Exit. Journey travel end. Round decision. Dispatch. They're ready to camp now. This guy who's still asleep. Now I can't tell if they're waking him up or not. Then everyone goes to sleep. Oh wait, no. It doesn't show the sleep tile because the tiles aren't set until after. This log is confusing because it logs your state right at the beginning before the rule even executes. So we don't see them all asleep until this one, but point is they're not, by the time they get moves, they're not able to do anything. Okay. What's going on? Yeah, that's nice. I don't use a mouse except for when I'm not trying to edit seriously. Like I use the mouse fine for like scroll wheel and clicking around because I'm thinking, but when it's time to edit, I don't have to switch to the mouse um for that kind of stuff either. But I don't really know how to learn like the Vim command, like the vocab. It's just not the way it's just not the way that I learn interfaces really. So around here we go. Fight. Here they're doing the fight. He's asleep. Doesn't look like anyone woke him up, and they would have done that. Wake up. Is a quick action. So you can do it in a fight, and they are scripted to do that, and plenty of them. This one might have used his quick action for the taunt. Any of them, oh, he was asleep anyway. Any of them could have used the quick action to wake him up. And they would have targeted him because he's the one they can target. So clearly that did not happen. And the wake up brain is written that they should just use it if they can. So I'm not quite sure what's happening here. Let's do debugger. Um I'm just trying to figure out why wake up isn't getting used. So why don't I go to RPG game scripts, look at the wake up tile, and we'll start with we want to mark this and this to see if they ever have an opportunity, and also delete everything else. Okay, so we are running the bot brain. Okay, we should have saved that move as one we want to do. So that was this. I'm expecting this next. Moves should have somebody doing a wake up. 4, 5, 6, 7 makes sense if we've got a couple of quick actions in there, or at least one. Shuffle and run moves. Okay, part doesn't matter. Presumably we get here. Should be able to see which tile we're trying to considering running right here. Attack, wake up. Okay, so wake up should be getting run. Counter tile ID is 3. Don't have. Okay. That suggests to me that the main problem is that we're screwing up the assign move counters part. Hello. Okay, so the issue here must be somehow it didn't have a quick action. It knows that it's enabled. Sure. 97. Oh, I think I get it. LolSat7777, can you explain what you are building? It's hard. It's an RPG simulator. If it's working, hey, here we go. I can run it. So right now, what it does, it lets me set up a system of RPG characters. They've got some very simple basic stats and some cool moves and items equipped to them at the beginning. And I set them off on a journey. I'll turn the music off while I explain, talking over it. Um, I can set them up on a journey, and during the journey, there are some rules. They have to make a certain number of steps forward, and they can do that by choosing to travel at the beginning of their journey. Like when they make a round and one round of their journey, they can make a decision to travel or to rest. If they make forward progress, then they can run into an encounter, and so then they go into a fight here, and they're fighting a couple of guys. You can see here is another little RPG encounter happens, and they use some of their abilities. They take some hits, and eventually maybe they beat this. Let's see here. Yeah, they beat this pair of guys, and so now they're exiting from the death check. They're exiting from the encounter, and they're back to their journey. And this one just wraps up what happened. Like we go from 2 to 3, as in the time has elapsed, and they once again get to decide. And they take a look what their situation is. They're still in pretty good shape. They go for it. They have another encounter, And that's what this does. So right now, this is how sophisticated the simulation is I can simulate this one journey. But a lot of what I want to do is to stitch together layers on top of these things to simulate more and more complex tapestries of mini games fit together. Right now, I've got this journey mini game that then flows into the encounter mini game, and all of these are driven by a set, like a generic set of tiles. That's what these $ things are. The tiles that can be attached to the characters that basically give them things they can do in different situations. So, um, right now, I am getting some of the last steps of the core design kind of figured out. And starting tomorrow, I think today we'll be done with all of this figuring out core design stuff that I've been doing for this week, because I was hoping to get to the next step as soon as possible, and it's taken 3 days already. But on the side, I also have this cool program called the Asset Viewer, which is essentially turned into um, like a 3D space with like a tile set that I can use to create the environment, and a 3D camera that I can swing around and look at what I've created. And let's see here. If I do see let's do work, right, and then go else I want to stare at for a sec. There we go. Track. Right, so you can like imagine that once I've got this, now that I got this viewer up and running and I have the simulation in good shape, I want to be able to start seeing the simulation. So I want to animate something like this character, and the characters on this side and the characters on this side having their combats, and see the changes of state happening as a 3D animation. And later, thanks for hanging out, Alex. Um, and uh, if I get that part working, then we can start talking about making player controls so that you can actually run the RPG yourself instead of watching the bots do it, which is how it's worked the whole time up until now. So I'm that's what I'm working on, is getting the core in good enough shape that I feel that I've closed out the arc of developing the core. Especially, it's not the core engine's final state, but the scripting language, so to speak, of the rules and the tiles. That's the thing I want to have a pretty good handle on, and that's what we're wrapping up here. Um, anyway, that's what an RPG simulator does. You can see they went and rested here. Camp. This is not implemented quite right. There should be because they don't really have moves for camp yet, but they will, and then that should let an hour pass, and then they should start resting. It looks like they were asleep for a whole day, essentially, the way it runs right now. Yeah, it's all written in C. C with some homespun programming tricks, some techniques I've been working on. C scripting is this thing I use so that I can use C a lot more like a scripting language, so I don't need to go and grab Lua or JavaScript or Python to finish the scripting half of an RPG programming task. I can write all the little tile scripts and rule scripts actually in C using C scripting. Yeah, Maria, I got the 3D version of pixel scaling going. So let's see, let's find a cool character here to look at. That'll work. What is this one called? Fire Dragon. Okay. That for the future. So yeah, you can see like I can zoom in and look around, and there's not, I mean, it's probably hard to tell on Twitch, I suppose, but I don't get any like shimmering artifacts, right? It's just nice, smooth uh, pixel art in 3D space. The 3D stuff? No, I don't think the 3D part was. I don't. I did some of the anti-aliasing work on stream, but not the 3D part. I can basically show you if you'd like a quick. Since I didn't do it on stream, I'll just give you the quick peek. How about that? Grab this off the VOD later. This is the sprite, vertex shader, and fragment shader. The number one trick that I had never really been using before is this F-width thing. There's this, I didn't know about this, but shaders can have these functions that can give you the derivative of an expression, which is something you can't usually do. But with shaders, fragments have certain components which vary from fragment to fragment. And so you can ask, okay, along the x-axis or along the y-axis, how is this variable varying? And F-width does that. So I no longer need to pass around the scale. I can just, even in 3D, I can just say, what's the F-width? And that does the right thing, apparently. The rest of it, though, is just like the main algorithm is basically the way you're going to have to spend some time looking at the VODs where I did this in more detail. And I might not have done a very good job of ever fully explaining it. But basically what you're trying to do, at the very simplest level, what you're trying to do is you don't want to just say turn off linear filtering and let your pixel art be pixely. That's the wrong thing to do, because then what happens is if you have like a black pixel and a red pixel next to each other in your pixel art and you've blown them up to be 10 by 10, if they're in 3D, it's even more than this. But if they're in 3D, you can imagine they're projected. So there are a couple of trapezoids or something. There are a couple of quads somewhere on the screen that are projected versions of those pixels. And so the edges of them, if they're just using nearest neighbor, no filtering, they will flicker like fully black, fully red, right, at the boundary, or fully black, whatever's in the background, right? It'll all be sparkly, flickery, aliasing everywhere. To make that not happen, though, you can't just linearly interpolate, because then instead of getting a nice crisp pixel art, you'll get just a terrible blur, right? And so the right thing to do is to say most of the pixels in this pixel will be fully black, but on the edges, I need to do linear interpolation. So the question is, how am I going to figure out how much black and red belong on one of those pixels? And the answer is that you basically, the way you end up doing it with this code, if you go through it and play with how it works, is you're going to take your how do I want to explain this? You take your coordinate, we're going to put it through a clamp that does the right thing. And to get it to the right location in the grid, the steps are basically that you have to shift your point, scale it to the right spot in the grid. So you want a UV coordinate between the two texels, but you want to clamp a bunch of the UV coordinates to the center of the right pixel, and a few of them actually interpolate. And the clamping is achieved by saying, take the UV you initially have and imagine blowing it way up and then rounding it down and then shrinking it back. It'd be better if I had a drawing with me. You just kind of have to look at the code and walk through it step by step. But the piece you need to know is that this essentially stands for multiplying by the scale factor. If you think about it like abstractly as, if this is 10 times bigger than it should be, which is not quite right, because like along the X and Y axis, it might be different depending on how it's being projected. But if this is the multiplying by the scale factor, then you'll understand the rest of it correctly. Okay. F pattern. So that's because I'm using instancing. So when I send down one of these sprites, for one sprite, I send down 6 points. But for those 6 points, I only send one copy of V origin, V x-axis, V y-axis, sprite dimension, UV rect, and color mode. So one sprite gets one of each of these, and then 6 of these. The pattern is the same for each one. It's just like 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and then 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, right? It's the two triangles that make a unit quad. And then I take those and multiply them. So basically, to place my thing in space, I say, okay, each vertex becomes something between 0 and 1 for x times the x-axis, something between 0 and 1 for on y for the, times the y-axis, and a center point. And that gives me those 6 points projected into the 3D space correctly. I put it through the normal transform matrix. So I calculate transform matrix for 3D perspective projection and the camera view and all that. And so I take the XYZ, project it, and then I use the pattern again here because what I want to know is how far along the way from the beginning to the end am I? And I multiply that by the sprite dimension. So like if I am at 0.3 on a right in the pattern, if this fragment is at 0.3 in the pattern on a sprite that has 100 pixels along the x-axis. So we have 0.3x on the pattern and 100 pixels in the sprite dimension along the x-axis. This becomes 100 times 0.3 or 30. So I get the coordinate of the spot on the texture where I want to sample in texel coordinates, right? Not in normalized coordinates, right there. This is the one that applies the grid trick. So you're basically, this right here says round q down to an integer, right? And then this part takes the fractional part of q. Inside of each major pixel, you're kind of creating another copy of the grid. And you're saying, imagine that we are going to take the fractional part, which we know we're in this pixel because we rounded to it. But now we're going to see, using the fractional part, are we very close to the edge or very close to the middle? That's what this part is figuring out. And it's figuring that out by taking the fractional part, scaling it way up, clamping it, and then adjusting that back into the center because you sample from, to get, when you go to sample from a texture, if your UV coordinate is right in the center of a texel, you'll get that color without any blending. So we're initially using an integer, but then we want to shift it back into the center of the pixel that was representing. You can figure out the rest. That's as much as I want to say without a picture. It's hard to describe without visualizations, which I did sketch out. I sketched out a little visualization in one of my streams for the asset viewer, but that was in 2D. But it'll give you the main idea, and then the code will give you the 3D version. So you should be good to go. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out why wake up wasn't getting actually activated, and this was supposed to be the answer. So brain goes, and now we find a sleeper. We choose which ally to wake up. We wake them up. All right. That should be good. I am pretty sure that that's working now. There's a way that I can find out, which I'm going to do. I'm going to take another 5-minute break, and then I will be back to test that out a little more. Okay. Okay. So what's left? I mean, was that actually it? I haven't looked into the move counter craft. Hmm. I'm still not sure what I want to do about move counters. The annoying thing with them, the annoying things with them are that they work as a tile and as a move kind, and I have to do this whole deal of translating between flags and their tiles, their associated tiles. I can't even automate it because they're not linked up in any way. I could try something like I could try saying that you're not going to actually use tiles for these, that move counters on characters are byte arrays that get allocated. And then assigned. Well, okay, there's one thing I can do, which is that reaction's actually not necessary anymore. This was one of the things I was looking forward to. I want quick action, reaction, 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 reaction. Okay. So death checks now give you one quick action and they require death reactions. Okay. It's just there's so many things to get more complicated if I switch off of move counters. I mean, the only way I could do it that I can think of that would be pretty reasonable would be to make this fixed forever, not scriptable. If I chose to do that, I could make this nice with ease. But otherwise, it's more like I would have to make a separate, if I was going to make it scriptable, I would need each move counter to be separate from the move kind, make a different symbol set for the action, quick action, and activity. I'd get rid of the tiles, and then I'd make a data structure that is attached to the player or to the character. Like each character would, and this would data orient just fine later down the road, but each character would contain this array whose length is determined by how many of these are, so it cannot be known statically. It can only be known at the beginning of the program. It could be known at link time, but it couldn't be known in time to change the type data. And it would still need to be able to expand for multiple plugins after that anyway. So ultimately what you end up wanting is an array with a byte for each one that is sitting as a pointer or block of data on the character entity directly so that you can just access it and ask like what's the value there and set what the value is when that's what you're trying to do. But then we would need the IDs to be separate from the move kinds because we would need this to be more dense. So it's not too many bytes. And there would still be an issue when you encode them as flags, where you have to map the flags from move kinds back to the counters. So yeah, there's just no way for me to use symbol sets to put this together in exactly the way I like. Something you can do with an enum that you cannot do with a symbol set is to create a shared index space with subspaces that are also meaningful. That's a missing feature of C scripting, which is interesting to note. Now, it might be that making this scriptable is a step too far, or that there are opportunities to make equivalent things later down the road anyway. Like, I mean, there are simple fixes like separating out special activities into um, actions and activities into narrow scope groups for specific context. So then, if you want to expand past quick actions and actions, what you're really doing is you're just and activities. If you want to expand past the original three, what you're really doing is just reusing one of the original three with another context and justifying that shouldn't be too hard, hopefully. Like, you just, the only thing that you can't do is make them simultaneous then. And there's also a thought here that maybe I shouldn't have made them simultaneous to begin with. Maybe quick actions should be simultaneous with quick actions and actions with actions. You should only ever have one move counter in play so that the number of moves for everyone is always one. It's just that's like it's really hard to see the set of options you've got. I think giving you as much of your decision as possible is the best way. Yeah, I can definitely see just reusing these in narrow contexts. Like, if I want something very slow over a longer and longer time, I'll just call it an activity. But if it's really like a project that spans a narrative year, that's fine. It'll just be played out in a different context. It won't be like I'm gonna have you play an infinite number of activities to your satisfaction and then do a project in those kinds of cases, right? Um, yeah, I think that I'm gonna just say let's make these fixed. I think that this will let me clean it. It'll let me tighten things up a bit in a way that I'm looking for, and it just feels like I'm a little bit overreaching in the abstraction on this part. Um, that I can make. These will probably still need to exist for the flagging to be coherent. We'll have move kind quick action, but here, yeah. So this isn't what sleep does at all. Sleep isn't gonna say anything about round to begin. Sleep is gonna say that dream is required, which should mean it can't be used to cause any damage. I gotta double check that everything makes sense at the end of the day here. Okay, so here we're gonna just say that these start looking a lot more like this. Okay, here's a real implementation for inf. You know, it makes me wonder if I did this the wrong way around. What if I just put a pair of move counters in instead of flags for the counters? And then the problem would be that I have to convert those 6 bytes into a 64-bit flag. It's just 3, this, or this bit, this 3. That happens there. This is happening 6 per character here. Here would be 3 per decision. It's definitely better here. Oh, it's not even okay. Yeah, definitely let's do it that way. Move selector. Okay, let's just change to representing it this way. Because then this can be counters equals decision counters. And all of this goes away. And then the only downside is that to figure out what's enabled, you got to do a little more work right here. You got to go if decision counters dot quick action, then enabled or equals RPG move kind flag quick action. Action becomes an action filter. And activity filter. So there we go. That's just 3 times per decision. So once or twice. Yeah, that's going to be the faster way to do it. Only possibility is that we could somehow set the move counters as known by at the level of the party. I don't think I might not ever want 2 parties to have different move counters, just aesthetically. Well, that's not true. I still literally have times where some parties do nothing while the other party gets to make their move. That's more about when decisions get made rather than like, it's balanced after both parties go. It's just that it's not simultaneous. But at the low level, it means they can be different. And so we just embrace that. Okay. Looks roughly like it always does, I think. Okay. Fight. They both get wiped out. Okay. I mean, everything looks right here looking at it. Okay. I just don't see anyone falling asleep from the sleep spores yet. I find that odd. Yeah, that seems like it's got to be a bug. Here's one. Why is it so rare? It might be just that it's getting killed too often. These might not be very tough anymore with the new rules about how moves get shuffled and run. And what is and isn't simultaneous. But let's think. Let's think. I might just need to look at my to-do list. Yeah, I guess that was it. That was really all I was trying to do. The rest of this is just since I finished the move counters, I think I've just been wondering about what's left to do. I mean, it's ready to go. Probably can get started tomorrow on visualizing it. I'm trying to think if like the only thing that I could do to wrap up for the night that feels like a good use of time right away is I don't have all of the old characters back yet. So why don't I just go and do a little bit of scripting to finish by putting in the characters that are still missing. Hang back is a quick action that does not deplete. It has the property of decrementing the target priority. Brain script tile for the default brains hang back rule is going to be we look at our party and we say if I am gonna if I could get killed by the incoming damage, but someone else in this party could take it, I'm gonna hang back. Decrease the odds that the deadly damage goes to me. That's the hang back move. And I've already kind of got that up and running a little bit. So if we have some enemies, estimate the incoming damage. This one is if can not survive if hit. damage. If this cannot survive all damage, I'm in danger. Is anyone not in danger? So, is there anyone whose hearts are large enough to take all the incoming damage? So, if someone in danger, if someone is safe, then use hang back. These more tactical moves take more brain scripting than moves I've had previously. Sorry, that's the mercenary. Cool. So, okay, so that's the mercenary. Let's try making a mercenary party. Mercenary party, which is just going to be a party of all mercenaries. And let's do over here in the simulator. Let's say instead of sending our adventure party on the journey, let's see how the mercenary party fares. So they don't have a captain or a wizard or a medic, but they have 4 mercenaries. What that means is they can manage damage in a way that other characters can't. Now, let's see, they travel. Okay. So you can see here what I'm kind of talking about. The one who got hit here was the one who already had 3 hearts. That's not by accident. These 3 all used hang back to manipulate the situation so that this would be the one that got hit, because they all looked and saw that these guys have 2 guys hanging out. We're in danger, like rank 2. They have 2 hearts. They're all a little nervous. He's not nervous. So they go, okay, well, he can stay up front. We're all going to hang back. Then he takes the 1 hit from this guy because they overestimated how much damage there was, which is another reason why this worked out well. And for them, death resolve, exit, and they keep on traveling. They come in for another fight. Another guy takes the hit here. Now their ability to thin out the damage isn't going to keep up, but they're going to be ready to rest. And so they're going back out with just 1 heart down from day 1. Two. Sleep mechanics are a little funny, so he shouldn't actually be staying asleep as much as he is. Look at that. Someone did use wake up. That's cool. Another encounter. A couple of goblins this time. Two, three, 2, 3. These 2 should have hung back. And let these 2 take the hits, but apparently that's not what happened. So it's not actually quite working like it should. So there's a couple of things that could be. Let me debug this a different way. RPG dot scripts, game.scripts .c should have it. How many times have I opened? Open another tab every time I forget. But it's already open. Um, um, let's see if this happens, and let's see if this happens. Okay, so they did say they wanted to use it. And so they did say decrement target priority. And you're telling me they didn't already have a target priority? I guess not, but that seems wrong in and of itself. Let's go on. What do you get back. You get a tile with a counter level of 0 and a min of -1. And you do deck. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's go and fix this. Apparently I never did this carefully. Tile ink is 1395. As soon as we do the tile board, this all gets eliminated anyways. But let's see. So we're incrementing by this amount. The maximum amount you can increment by is max minus counter. We clamp the amount we're incrementing by the max. And then we make a local copy. And we clamp it again. I'm going to skip the middleman there. Local amount gets modified and then clamped again to the final amount, which then gets added directly to the counter. So these all get an opportunity to modify the variable increment. It's not just happening after the increment is applied, but rather these tile inks are changing the result. Then max amount equals tile counter minus tile min. So this should tell us how much we're allowed to decrease by. Clamp top amount max amount. That should always be greater than or equal to this. So this will be positive, fit into a U32. This will go to there. We'll get some changes based on decrement hooks. Max amount. Counter minus equals final amount. If the counter has dipped below 0, we grab the tile proto because we want to check if we have to discard it at 0, and if it is, we discard the tile. So that's cool. It doesn't make sense that he would keep taking the hit. This is working. So show me again. We decided to use it because the holder hard count 1, incoming damage 2, right? That's right. Someone is safe, right? So when you use it, you On a tile deck. How this tile isn't being set. That's also weird to me. I gotta check in about that. RPG tile, new tile deck. Max amount is 1. That's how much we're doing it by a local amount. No one wants to say anything about that. The counter goes to -1. We don't discard this one at 0, so good. And sooner or later, you're gonna roll a target from that party. You're gonna go. Target party is super small. Target priority is 0. Target index max target priority 0. We save that one. Go 0 again, and then we go 0 again, and then we go -1. So this is too small. Doesn't show up in the set. So the target should be any of the characters who have their heart set to 3. So that should be, I mean, that looked like it does the right thing. Okay, here, these two should hang back. These two should take the hits. That's not what happens, right? That's what's odd to me. I'm trying to think of the best way to isolate and see this now. I think what I need to do is change to Goblin Road. Take a quick look. So no, every time we kill one of these guys, we're also going to have a new damage here. So there's the first one. He took the second one. He took the third one. Any of them should still be able to take it right now. Because only one at a time. There, that one has now taken it twice. So I think this isn't going to work. I'm going to need 2 goblins in each party because otherwise they never get afraid of taking any damage. So, okay, these two should now both be hanging back. Neither of them should take any damage. What actually happens is, okay, this guy took both damage this time. Now he's the only one who should be hanging back because there's only one enemy. So anyone besides him should take the damage. And that's what happens. rest, they heal. They're just down 1 heart total so far. I want to look at the next one. That'll be the one that's interesting. The way it's set up, he should take all the damage, and if anything else happens, now it looks like it's doing exactly the right thing. These two should be hanging back. These two take the damage. Yeah, now it looks like it's working exactly right. Why didn't it look like it was working? How did I get confused when I was using this route about who is taking damage? Yeah. These two took damage. Next round. These two should be hanging back. And he takes the damage. He falls asleep. I finally wake him up here because all of this is automatic, just bookkeeping problem, right? This is necessary. This are just closing out 2 of the machines, pops. This is bookkeeping on the journey, travel, back to this. And finally, progress, but we don't actually get moves until here. These are just a branch and dispatch. Branch decision, dispatch, code. I suppose I could condense it all into one state. The dispatch wouldn't be necessary since counter. In fact, that's always possible in theory, right? Anytime a state just does computation and a go to with no player moves in between. We could say we want that to go a lot faster and skip out on the internal processing when it's not helping. Yeah, there's stuff to do there inside the machine implementation details to speed it all up. Now that the languages work. But anyway, journey, travel, encounter, Right, so now this one took the hit. This all looks correct. Here, there's only one enemy, so no one had a reason to go back. They camp. Good health again. He should be hanging back. Somehow he took the damage this time. Yeah, that right there is what I'm talking about. That does not look like it's working right. Right, there's two enemies. So he should be predicting that he's in danger. But that none of these are. So that he should hang back and let the 2 damage fall on. Somehow he takes one anyways. I might need to be able to see which moves people are doing in the log more than the states. Like the log is another to do here, and something that might be really nice is for the log to get replaced with the data structure that will be reporting to the graphic system too. So instead of looking at the log of what happened, I'll be looking at the log of what should have been seen in terms of data, and that will support the goal of working on the graphic system, and at the same time probably be a better log for stuff like this, so I can see, what move should have been played or should have been seen as getting played. Why does he take that hit? It doesn't make sense. Not this one. This one. Why does he take this hit? Why don't I see any mistakes in the logic in the other simulation? Maybe I just didn't run it enough. Let's just look real carefully at Goblin Road. I don't think they could possibly be surviving this, by the way. Yeah, they're not. Okay. Damage. Counter. Okay, here it didn't work. Right, these two should have been the ones hanging back. Somehow he took the hit. Okay. What I want to do is run this in... I'm just going to modify the log. Great. Well, hold on. Let me check a different thing. I know where there is one source of bug. Um, and that's something is going wrong with the target priority tiles themselves. They should be showing up sooner than they do. Encounter round decision, encounter round dispatch, fight. Yeah, they still don't have target priorities at this point, and they should. Um, okay. And my logging needs to know that we're using signed counters now. All right, so here we can see some characters have -1 target priority. This and this had -1 target priority. So now we can see the target priority values a little better. That might actually help. Now, why are the target priorities 0 for these guys if they're not getting set on the other guys? That's another question. But here, for instance, why isn't he... Oh, he's doing it. Okay, so he did it. Oh, I know what's going wrong. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, so technically there is another thing I could do. And even though it's been a long stream and it's late in the day, I'm gonna do it. I haven't done move speeds yet. Okay. We're gonna need to do that. Yeah, okay. Let me run another 5-minute break, and I will come back to discuss what the bug is and what the next steps are. Okay? Actually, let me make this a 10-minute break because I realize I should probably figure out how I'm gonna get food too. All right, 10 minutes. Okay, I've changed my mind. I think I'm gonna stop the stream. I don't see any easy way for me to fit dinner in 10 minutes or to get it set up for within 10 minutes without in the way that I like. So instead, I'm gonna stop here. I'll come on. We're just gonna have a late stream today. I'm still gonna come back and fix the speed thing on stream. Because I think that'll be a fun last piece, and I can get the mercenary working, and the rogue also needs move speeds actually, and I can fix the bug with the target priority still. Actually, I can do that before I go. Why don't we do that? Because that's what I was on the trail of that. Here's what I mean. Why is it the target priority is not actually getting set? I thought there was. Oh, right. So the target priority sets itself to 0. It's not. Okay. What do I think of that? I think that's fine. The default target priority is 0, right? If I ask for the counter of a tile that is missing, I get a 0. So if I don't set the target priority on something, it'll report 0 that way. And if I set it, then I could just reset it to 0 this way. I think this is stupid. I think I'm gonna end up changing this, but it's fine. Oh yeah, no bug. I'm gonna go and figure out my dinner plan and be back in like 40 minutes to an hour and a half. Something kind of late, and I will uh do the speed on moves so that the mercenary move of hanging back always takes effect before he gets hit. Okay? Okay. I will see you in a bit.